Hello and welcome to the first lecture of Artificial Neural Networks. In this lecture, we are going to study about the different structures of the neuron and also the communication between neurons in the sense how the electrical and chemical properties of the human brain are responsible for communication between two human beings. These are the two topics which we are going to look at in this class. First, let us talk about the structure of the neuron, the arrangement of neuronal parts which are responsible for human behavior. As you can see from the diagram, you can see three parts of the neuron. One is called as dendrite, the other one is called as soma, which is also called as cell body, and the third one is called as axon. These are the three major constituents of a neuron. So when you look at the dendrites, they are very bushy or branching structures which act as the source of input for your neuron. They are used to receive signals from the neighboring neurons, and they will carry on them to the internal parts of the current neuron. Or in other words, they also act as an interface between the external environment and your current neuron. So how do they look like? They are the branching structures which will be receiving as many inputs depending upon the application which the human being is taking upon. Or you can say that they are able to relay the information from the external environment to the cell body. In a short, these are the input elements of the neuron. The second part of the neuron is the cell body, which is also called a soma, which is going to receive the inputs from the dendrites. So this cell body acts as the processing element of the neuron. In short, you can call it as CPU of the computer or CPU of the human brain. So how do they look like? They are a thin, long structure which are usually responsible for the computational and the logical operations. They are made up of many elements, uh, predominantly sodium and potassium ions, in addition to many biological chemicals are also available in this cell body or soma. So once this operation is done, the information is passed on to the thin long structure element which is called as the axon. So these three things together form the core element of a neuron. When the elements or when the parts of the neuron gets activated, a specific action will be taking place in the real time situation. So this is the overall structural arrangement. You can find out how complex is a single neuron, or in other words, collection of neurons, which is called as artificial natural neural networks. These neurons are going to transmit information in a complete randomized fashion so that the information is going to be transmitted in all directions or to all parts of the human body for a specific action to take place. So now our responsibility of this studying this subject is to create an artificial neuron. Once you create an artificial neuron, you can make them work in a specific direction to make sure that application is being carried out. Before going into that, let us look at the second agenda of today's class, how the communication between the neurons take place. So we have two types of communications in the neuron. One is called as electrical communication and the other one is called as chemical communication. And electrical communication takes place at a different place, and the chemical communication takes place at a different place. Normally, you can say that electrical communication takes place at the cell body and the chemical communication takes place at the um, junction point of axon, which is a different part, which I will talk about that in a few minutes from now. First, let us see what is meant by this electrical communication. So when you take or when you zoom in on a cell body or soma in particular, you can see there are many ions, many electrical elements or many pumps, lipids, biological elements available in and around the cell body. To be precise, we are going to look at the ions distributed in and out of the cell body. Many different types of ions are available, but we are going to talk about two ions. One is the potassium ions and the other one is the sodium ions. So when a human brain is at rest, or when we do not do any specific action, you can find out that the potassium ions inside the cell body is predominantly high, and the sodium ions outside the cell body is predominantly high. So inside and outside, there is a difference between these concentration and the types of ions. Now, when a specific input is received via the dendrites, as I have already told you, the dendrites are responsible for transferring some inputs from the external environment to the cell body. So when they receive a specific input from the external environment, what happens is there is a complete reverse in concentration of ions. The sodium ions, which are predominantly high outside, rush in, and the potassium ions, which are predominantly high inside, would like to move out. This creates a change in concentration which is equal to plus 70 millivolts. This is an electrical potential. Because it is of very less value, it is not going to do harm to any parts of the human body. This plus 70 millivolts is called as action potential. So the previous way of concentration, the resting state, is called as the resting potential, which is somewhere approximately equal to minus 70 millivolts. So only when there is a change in electrical value of minus 70 millivolts to plus 70 millivolts, some action will be taking place. Now what happens is this plus 70 millivolts, which is created in the cell body or soma, will travel all through the axon to the next part of the neuron, which is nothing but our axon. So here I want to tell one more additional information. This chemical communication takes place when you have a join of two neurons, or in other words, when you have a new natural neural networks in place. This is very, very important. Electrical communication in a single neuron, but chemical communication takes place between two neurons. You can see the fourth part of the neuron, which is called as the synapse. So this synapse is the junction point of two neurons, or you can say one neuron is transferring the information to another neuron via synapse. So this is the structural arrangement of synapse. You can see a black dot indicating the synapse, where on the right hand side you have a neuron, and also on the left hand side you have a neuron. The axon, which is receiving the plus 70 millivolts, is transferring the information to the next neuron via the synapse. So dendrites carry those information to the next neuron. This is the way how the cyclic process goes on. Now what happens in synapse? Let us zoom in and find out how this chemical communication is taking place in synapse. You can see the diagram here. On my left hand side, you can see the axon, where we are going to collect the plus 70 millivolts generated from the cell body, and this plus 70 millivolts travel all through axon, passing through many elements, and it will come to a bulb like structure which is present at the end of the axon of one neuron. In the bulb-like structure, we have many small, very slender bag-like structures which are called as synaptic vesicles. Inside these synaptic vesicles, there are many chemicals which we call it as neurotransmitters. So when plus 70 millivolts potential travels relatively at a higher speed, they come and bombard with these bag-like structures, break open the bag-like structures, and the chemicals or the neurotransmitters are released. And these transmitters are collected at a place. You can see the narrow white spots over there, which is called a synaptic cleft, the place between the differentiation between two neurons, the receiving neuron and the transmitting neuron. The chemicals are placed over there. When the chemicals are placed over there, the other side of the neuron will get activated. They immediately sense some information is available or present in the synaptic cleft. So they have a procedure or a protocol by which the information will be captured in a biological way, and then they are taken care, or then they are sent to the cell body of their neuron. Again, the same process of plus 70 millivolts takes place, travels through the axon, it comes and bombard with the synaptic vesicles, and the next neuron will get initiated. This is the process of continuously bombarding and releasing the chemicals. These are called as chemical reactions, and this is responsible for the continuous effect or the chain effect of different types of neurons. And electrical communication and chemical communication, when they go hand by hand, a human being can take decision on his own. Let us talk about the decision making process and the further advancement in this communication in the